Alright, in today's Whiteboard Wednesday, I'm going to go over some different types of autoregulation. And what autoregulation is it's a way to adjust workouts based upon how an individual is feeling that particular day. And it's not something quite as simple as, oh, I feel good today, I'm going to go hard in the gym, or oh, I'm not feeling so great, I'm going to take it easy. That is a way of autoregulating, but it's not particularly optimal because it's not very specific. And so these are going to be some more specific ways to autoregulate programming. And what autoregulation does is allows for long-term consistent progress. Instead of accumulating too much fatigue and getting into overreaching and overtraining, it works with the natural fluctuations that everyone has in their energy levels, their hormone levels, everything like that, just based upon whatever they may be going through in life at that particular time, whether it's work stress, relationship stress, anything like that, or if they're feeling great because they don't have a lot of stress. It's going to work within that to allow long-term consistent progress, which is what we always want. So the first one that I'm going to cover is autoregulation for strength training. So this is strength-specific work, so we're talking about slow lifts, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. We're also talking about things like weighted pull-ups and weighted dips where you're going to be adding more weight to that movement. And one of the best ways to autoregulate strength training is through the use of RPEs. Now, RPE training was originally used for endurance training, for endurance athletes. And then Mike Tuchscherer and some of the guys at Reactive Training Systems, they've developed a system of RPE that's intended specifically for strength training. And it's a scale from 4 to 10 instead of 1 to 10 because anything less than 4 doesn't really pertain to strength training. And RPE is based upon how many reps you have left in the tank at the end of a set. So 10 RPE is going to be no reps left in the tank, 9 is going to be 1, etc. And the more self-aware you can become, the more specific you can get with that. You can even get into 8.5, 9.5, etc. Now, as with anything pertaining to autoregulation, it's not for everyone. Autoregulation is not for everyone. For beginners, they're not going to have the self-awareness and maturity to actually be able to autoregulate because it requires a great deal of self-awareness. It requires a lack of ego, and it also requires you to not undersell yourself and your abilities as well. So that's something that takes a lot of time to build for most people. It takes a lot of experience, and that's something that we can foster, any good coach can foster in their athletes. Starting a beginner off with a simple linear progression is great for most people because they're going to be able to make very quick progress at the beginning, whether they're increasing weight or reps, sets, tempo, whatever the case may be. Using a linear progression is going to get them very good results. But for more advanced individuals, that can sometimes burn them out because they're going to be pushing too hard to increase that weight every session or every few sessions or whatever the case may be. So just asking people, how many reps do you think you had left after that set? Or just simply, how did you feel? How'd that set feel? Can be a good way to get people to reflect on what they just did and how they felt while they were doing it. And that's the first step towards being self-aware enough to actually get into some more specific stuff like autoregulation. So back to RPEs. If you're working with RPEs, it can look like a lot of things. You can say 3 sets of 5 at 7.5 RPE. But one of the most common ways, and that works fairly well, is something like this. Work up to 4 at 9 RPE. And what this means is you're going to work up to a set of 4 with 1 rep left in the tank. So you're going to warm up, and then you're going to typically have a ballpark area where you know you're going to be in for a set of 4 at 9 RPE based upon having built that self-awareness through doing lots of sets at 10 RPE, 9 RPE, even sets to failure and failing in those beginning stages on things like linear progressions and other things like of that nature, you can have a ballpark area of where you're going to be for 4 at 9. And so you're going to go for a particular weight, and then you're going to dial it in. If you think, say you do your first set at 4, it's an 8 RPE. Bump it up 10 pounds, it's an 8.5. Bump it up another 10 pounds, you're at a 9, and that's going to be your top set. And so that's a way to autoregulate intensity. You can also use RPEs to autoregulate volume as well. For example, there are several different methods, but load drops are pretty popular. And I know that Mike Toucher and some of the guys at RTS have gone away from the use of fatigue percents, but it's still a great method and it works for a lot of people. So load drop, 5%, basically you would take the top weight that you did for 4 reps at 9 RPE, you take 5% off of that, and then you do sets of 4 until you reach 9 RPE again. And there are a few different methods of this that load drops are going to be a little bit better for hypertrophy and accumulating volume. And what that does is, if you're tired, it's going to take you fewer sets to reach that 9 RPE again. Likewise, if you're tired, that your top set of 4 at 9 RPE might be a little lower than it would be on a day that you're feeling good. So that autoregulates intensity, and then this autoregulates volume. And so it prevents you from doing more than your body is capable of that particular day. Now, if we're talking about power movements, so for example, the snatch, the clean and jerk, so the Olympic lifts. They're powerful, they're technical lifts. Something like this obviously isn't going to work. You can't do a clean and jerk and say, oh yeah, I have one more rep left in the tank. That may be the case, but what is that rep actually going to look like? Is it going to be sloppy and awful? It's hard to gauge with movements, with power movements. So a great way of autoregulating any sort of power movement, like the Olympic lifts, is something like this. So work up to a heavy triple, fast with perfect form. And so that gives, working up to a heavy triple, what does that mean? People who have a little bit more of an ego or who want to push themselves a little bit more might go a little too far with that. And so by giving some more specifics, like fast and with perfect form, that gives them a more specific thing to shoot for and to know if they've gone too far. So something like that is a great way to autoregulate any sort of power movement. Now for gymnastics, one of the common things that you'll see, and this is a great way to autoregulate gymnastics movements, is something like max -2. Now obviously you can't, for gymnastics movements, use something like RPEs, typically, because it's going to be a set weight. Whether you're doing just body weight pull-ups or whether you're doing pull-ups with a weight vest, it's going to be a set weight across all of your sets. So something like max -2, that means you leave 2 reps left in the tank. That's going to be a good way of autoregulating gymnastics movements. Now there is one example that doesn't really fall into any of these categories, and that's handstand push-ups. And for handstand push-ups, you can actually use RPEs, but instead of increasing load, you can actually manipulate another variable. You can increase range of motion. And in my opinion, this is actually the best way to increase handstand push-ups in someone who can't do a whole lot of them. And obviously, if we're talking about a beginner, there are more important things for them to develop first. For example, just general upper body strength and balance before they move into handstand push-ups. But if someone has built a little bit of a base and wants to increase their ability to do handstand push-ups, but they can't get a whole lot, and they can't accumulate a whole lot of volume because they're not getting very many, they're getting 2 or 3 per set. Using this method is a great way to accumulate volume. And as far as I know, this is actually my creation. If not, that's fine, and someone can call me out on it, but as far as I know, this is kind of my baby. And so essentially what you do is handstand push-up and say, it looks pretty much like it would for strength work. Work up to, let's say, 6 at 9 RPE. And basically you would start out with a small range of motion. The screen's kind of low. Yeah, small range of motion, 6 reps. And basically you increase the range of motion doing that same number of reps until you reach a 9 RPE, until you reach a range of motion where you can do 6 reps with 1 rep left in the tank. And that's a phenomenal way to accumulate some volume on those muscles and to get people used to that movement, get them used to being inverted, get them used to feeling the weight of having your entire body weight supported on your hands. That's a great way to improve that. In my opinion, that's the best way to improve handstand pushes for people who don't have them down very well at first. The last thing I want to cover today is a couple types of strength programming that you'll see in a lot of gyms these days, CrossFit gyms in particular, because they involve large group classes and they're going to be lifting weights. And most CrossFit gyms have caught on to the fact that you really do want to have people do some strength-specific work in addition to Metcons and things of that nature. And so some of the things that you'll typically see that aren't really auto-regulated, but that we can improve significantly. This is one of the examples. So this is 5 sets of 5. But what exactly does this mean? Is this 5 sets of 5 across? Because there are commas, that typically denotes that there is going to be some sort of change in weights between each set, and it's not going to be 5 sets of 5 across. However, are those sets increasing? Are they decreasing? Typically, they're going to be increasing, but that's not always the case. But the problem is, what are you working up to here? This is incredibly nonspecific as to what you're actually going to be doing. Obviously, the coach may give some more specifics, but most people would look at this and what do they work up to? Are they working up to a new 5-rep max? Or are they working up to a heavy set of 5? Are they working up to a moderately heavy set of 5? A moderate set of 5? There's no really way to know. And so, unfortunately, what you'll often have in those group programming settings is people will just kind of go towards what they're naturally accustomed to. The people who tend to undersell themselves and their abilities are going to go a little bit too light. The people who have big egos and who want to show off are going to go too heavy, and they're going to end up driving themselves into overtraining at some point. Another example that you might see is something like this. 4 to 6 sets of 4 to 6 reps. Some people do reps and then sets. It just depends on the coach's particular notation. But we're going to say sets times reps. 4 to 6 sets of 4 to 6 reps. And when you look at this, it should be somewhat auto-regulated because the number of sets and the number of reps is not set. It's not set in stone, so it's going to vary depending on how the person feels, but they may be working to a max on each of these, and they may be forced to go to lower reps because they're working too hard. For example, they may do their first set, and it's a heavy set of 6, and the next set they're only able to get 5 and then 4, because if we're using RPEs, essentially they would be going to 10 RPE each set. And again, that's a great way to drive yourself into overtraining. It's a great way to get injured. And those aren't things we want if we're talking about longevity, which is always the goal and always should be the goal of anyone who's training. So 4 to 6 sets of 4 to 6, and then 5 sets of 5, like this. An easy way to improve something like this, I'm not going to say, oh, these are bad, no one should ever use them. I'd rather talk about ways that we can improve these systems that are so common in many gyms now. And one of those ways is just to give some more specifics. Kind of like we did with the power example, you can just say something like this. Perfect form. Fast. Because what that allows them to do is it gives them a little bit more specific of a metric, something more specific to shoot for. Now granted, if you're in a large group class, some people are still going to screw it up, undoubtedly. But it gives them something to base it on, and it also gives the coach something to call people out on potentially. If they're grinding all their reps out and it's not fast, that's something for the coach to say, those reps aren't fast anymore, you're done for the day for that movement, or whatever the case may be. And so that's a great way for them to keep those people in check and to help them build self-awareness by pointing those things out, pointing out when their form starts to collapse, and starts to degrade, pointing out when their reps start to slow down, and that helps build that self-awareness for those clients. And the same goes for this. You stop doing sets when the reps slow down. You stop doing reps when the sets slow down. So you do the first set and your reps start slowing down at 4, and then 5 is a little slower. You cut it off after that. The second set, 4th reps, maybe slowing down a little bit. 5th rep, a little bit slower, cut it off again. Third set, say that the 4th rep is slow, you cut it off at that. And so then they just ended up doing 3 sets of, 2 sets of 5, 1 set of 4. And that's something that coaches need to not be afraid of, and clients as well, is cutting off early. So this, if someone assumes that they're going to be able to do more weight than they do, and they misjudge their own ability, cut it down. Don't have them push too hard. Because in the long run, pushing too hard is just going to be bad for them. And it's more important to kind of keep them within their own ability, and to also teach them that if you're going to push too hard and you're not going to obey this stuff, I'm not going to let you work that hard. And so that gets people to check their ego and to start getting a better idea of what their actual capabilities are.